Hi, Rebound Stronger listeners. I'm so excited today to have my friends Delane Cooper here for this episodes. Delane and I connected through Soga. Well, you must have heard this many times, School of Greatness back in July. So Delane is a very upbeat person, has a very upbeat personality. Also a friend with a big heart who helped me connect with other people in Soga also for my podcast. And she also gave me some challenge and advice to improve my relationship with my family members. So Delane is a custom jewelry designer, goldsmith who express her creativity by making beautiful pieces which tell meaningful stories to the wearer. She works with many different types of metals, pearls, precious color stones, as well as diamonds. Her jewelry has been featured in Elle Magazines, Royal Ontario Museums, and many others. Every piece of her jewelry tells a story. So one of the jewelry which I saw in her website, which has a very interesting story, is the one she made for her client to pay tribute to a couple with 63 years of 60 years of marriage. So the husband was the strength for his wife during a decade of memory loss. So amazing story and also beautiful ring. All right. She also has an amazing story of courage through her journey overcoming childhood abuse, having low esteem, and also dealing with medical issues, then ultimately finding unconditional love, her true strength and potentials because of love. So, hi, Delane. Welcome to Rebound Stronger podcast.
Thank you, Fauci. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so excited to have you here. So maybe let's start with something positive. What are you grateful for today at this moment?
I am grateful for the fact that you and I have had the opportunity to connect and that I have a new friend in my life. For that, I am grateful for.
Thank you. Same here. All right, let's start with maybe you can share your story, your speech from the speech. I think that was a really beautiful how you wrote about your life experience. So that's why I decided I want to hear that again from you, and I'll let the listeners directly hear from your own word without me interrupting the storyline. All right.
Thank you, Fauci. Well, once again, thank you for letting me share my story of how I went from the valley of trauma and climbed the peak to triumph. I no longer perceive my life as a series of peaks and valleys, rather a series of heartbeats and the silence in between the beats, meaning I am grateful to live to the rhythm of life. So what happened to me in order for me to speak with you today? Allow me to take you back in time. It was early in the morning before breakfast, and I was at the ironing board ironing my white collared shirt and my pleated tartan skirt of red, green, and white. My green cardigan was on the bed to complete my Catholic school uniform. The year was 1979. Margaret Thatcher was elected as the first female prime minister in the UK, and I was in grade 4. Once the uniform was on, breakfast finished, backpack packed, it was off to school. On this particular day, each student received a book and a form, which was to be signed by a parent to acknowledge that we were going to learn about human reproduction. My mother was often sick at home or in the hospital. Being sick seemed like a regular occurrence, as if it was a part-time job. On this particular day, she was in the hospital, resulting in me asking my father to sign my form. Later that night, he used this opportunity to literally give me a sexual education. The form was signed. marking the beginning of my abuse. While growing up, what was unusually important to me was not the abuse, but the comment made at parent-teacher meetings year after year that I was not performing to my potential. I wanted them to ask me why I wasn't living up to my potential. Then I would have talked and told them. I did not understand why in grade 6, the teacher said to my parents, "Your daughter seems to be more mature in ways than the other girls in her class." When my parents told me this, I thought to myself, please ask me. I can tell you why. How I yearned to do well in school and be like the other students in my class, smart. My lack of performance in school was due to not getting a proper night's sleep, thereby impacting my ability to concentrate at school and complete homework. For over 4 years, I was 9 years old, 10, 11, and 12 years old. This daily cycle led to poor grades and low self-esteem. I felt alone, terrorized, and emotionally shut down. How did my trauma impact me? In 1982, Michael Jackson's album Thriller was released and I was in grade 7. While sitting in a face-to-face confession at church, I confided with my parish priest in the hopes that he would help. I broke the silence by saying, "Bless me, Father, for I have not sinned. My Father has." Bewildered, he asked, "What are you saying, child?" My father touches me in ways that we were taught in grade 4, but was wrong, and I was too scared to tell anyone. His response? "Sometimes our parents know not what they do. Have you told anyone, your mother?" When I shook my head, indicating no, he said, "Say a Hail Mary and ask God for guidance." Months after that confession, my body paid the price of shutting down my emotions of real feelings, and I succumbed to viral meningitis. I remember being on the table in the emergency room at the hospital as the doctors performed the lumbar puncture, me screaming in pain and thinking to myself, so this is what I get for being selfish, by going against the 5th commandment, honor thy mother and father. I was being punished for telling on my father at confession. At the age of 13, I tried to run away. When that did not work, I tried to overdose on my mother's painkillers. I was tired of being tired. By the time I was 14, I had had it and couldn't live like this anymore. I mustered up the courage to try again, to reach out for help. I went to my school counselor on the last day of school in grade 9. When I had told her what my father had been doing for the last several years, her response was, "I'm sorry to hear that. Well, let's see how the summer goes and let me know if it continues when you return in September. We'll deal with it then." My life had capsized and I was floating in a stormy sea. Twice, I called out to my rescuers to save me from the abuse, and twice ignored. When I was 15, my father declared he owned me one night in early January, that I belonged to him. It was after he left my room I knew I had to make a plan to leave. On a late January day, I used a wrestling tournament as my opportunity to run away from home since I was part of the wrestling team as a stat girl. I packed a small gym bag, left a letter addressed to both parents indicating I would not be returning, forged my parents' signature on the permission slip, and took off to Eureka, California. It was exhilarating to feel free, to feel that I could possibly sleep the whole night without interruption was a dream coming true. After the tournament was over, I returned with the team and went to a teammate's house to figure out where I was to run away to. As we were brainstorming where I could go, the phone rang. It was my father calling to say he was coming to pick me up and bring me home. I felt I had no choice. It was as if I was hypnotized by his voice and had to go with him. In February of 1985, at 15 years old, my public speaking teacher and I were sitting in a cold classroom before school was to start. We were talking about the debate that was to take place later that day. We both were smoking a cigarette and drinking a coffee, and I remembered feeling he was someone that I could trust, an ally. In the middle of our conversation, I blurted, "Norm, I need to tell you something. I'm being sexually molested by my dad." He put his cigarette down and said, "You know, I'm bound as a teacher to report this to the police." I welled up with tears, nodded my head. Finally, I was heard. In a few short hours, a cyclone of emotions hit me. The police interviewed me at school, my father was arrested and put in jail, and my mother and brother were upset with me because I broke up our family. Later that night, my grandmother called. I was expecting loving support from her because I had always thought we had a close relationship. We had spent a lot of time together. I was shocked by the words that passed my ears. "You are a whore and a slut." She continued to say she was going to do what it took to get her son out of jail. My father's brother-in-law, a lawyer, got him out the following day. My heart crushed. The price I paid for speaking out against my sexual abuser was abandonment by the two most important women in my life, my mother and my grandmother. From grade 4 to grade 10, ages 9 to 15, I was sexually abused by my father almost every day, and in some cases repeatedly, when I was home from school due to illness or perceived illness by my father. At age 15, I was legally taken away from my parents and became a ward of the court and part of the foster care system. What helped me get through my trauma? In the spring of 1985, my friend Kristen took me home, and a couple with an open heart named Judy and Bill, whom later I would call Mom and Dad, took me in to be part of their family. They showed me unconditional love. No matter how often I shut the bedroom door in their faces, they loved me. They loved me regardless of the grades I received, and they loved me when I was at dinner with them. Experiencing their love was new and scary, but there was this nagging fear that they would love me only for a little while, then discard me. The body finds ways to cope with trauma, and my body expressed its pain and anger about my abuse through endometriosis. After years of writhing pain and the mental anguish that accompanies endometriosis, I decided that living was more important than playing victim to emotional confusion from my childhood and physical pain. So at the age of 23, I opted to have surgery to remove my uterus and ovaries. Life was physically pain-free after surgery. I enjoyed living despite my choice in men. I believed I was damaged goods, and for that negative thought, I paid for dearly with a string of relationships with men who tortured me mentally. The final straw was living with an alcoholic man who raped me in a drunken stupor, then left me for another woman. Months later, following that relationship, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. My body was talking to me big time. The pain was excruciating and life seemed pointless. Prescriptive upper so I could go to work, and downer so I could sleep, and narcotics for the pain. My bad days were bedridden, and my good days, I walked with a cane. In 2001, one love in my life passed away, my adopted dad. Another love came into my life, my husband. The power of love is truly remarkable. With love from my husband, my adopted mom, and my sister, and a tribe of incredible friends, many of whom I have met at a club called Verity, life began to change for me. So how did my trauma transform me? Since the age of 15, I've experienced a series of springboard of events, but my evolution for growth took flight in 2008 when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with 15 other women from the ages of 38 to 69. Climbing that mountain was an active metaphor of my life's journey. That climb taught me that with proper support, training, guidance, meditation, breathing, and focus, that moving forward one step at a time is how adversity becomes an opportunity for growth. Climbing Mount Kilimanjaro took a team of trained guides and friends to physically and mentally help me to the summit. My trauma experience had been a journey from anger and hate to being open to love, guidance, and support. In my case, negative emotions did turn. They became less painful and with time have paved the way to a more positive way of living life with love and support from friends and family. I now practice self-love and self-care, recognize the importance of health in mind, body, and spirit, have a personal compass of love and compassion, live in abundance and gratitude, and enjoy the adventures of life every day. Mary Tyler Moore said, "You can't be brave if you've only had wonderful things happen to you." I am here today to share my voice, to share my story, because it's important to me to let others know that a survivor of childhood sexual abuse is not a damaged good. I am proof. I'm a jewelry designer, goldsmith, storyteller, wife, and friend. I am Delane.
Thank you, Delane. That's really amazing. I heard it second time, but still, it is always amazing and touching.
Thanks, Fauci.
Yeah. So, Delane, you've gone through so much, right? From your childhood, sexually abused by your fathers, not listen. You cry that people will ask you questions, will listen to you, the priests, the teachers, and ultimately you got hurt by the public speaking teacher. So it takes a long time, years, right? So what keeps you going? Where did you find your strength after being ignored, even punished for telling the truth that you were abused?
I believe that I had something, that my life was bigger than me, and that I was not supposed to be this person that was to be abused and held as, I viewed it as a slave, as a sex slave. And I didn't think that that's what I deserved. I knew that my life was something more. And how I knew that, I don't know, Fauci, but it was a driving force for me.
You mentioned about trying to overdose also, right? So at that point in time, right, how you overcome that that feeling or that low point at that point?
Well, there were several times, actually. I tried to attempt suicide. With the pills, it just happened that I didn't take enough. I thought I took what was left in the bottle, and I came to the following day very groggy, but it wasn't enough. A couple of times I've attempted overdosing with other drugs, slashing my wrists, and almost jumping over onto a highway. What stopped me from, more as an adult, from jumping over was, this is going to sound strange, but I do believe in angels. And it was 3 steps. I put 1 step, my hand on the railing, and just before I was about to hop over, an angel, I believe, put a hand on my shoulder. I could feel something on my shoulder. And the words were, "You may be ready to die today, but the people down there aren't." And I stopped myself. And I went and sought some help. And what was interesting was I went to a women's clinic and saw a therapist or psychologist there, and she said, "The interesting thing about you, Delane, is you're mentally aware of
Where?
what's going on. And so I don't think that you'll actually commit suicide. And it was after that attempt, especially since I believe an angel had helped me prevent that, especially living with the guilt of potentially have killed a couple of people on that highway. I've never attempted suicide after that again.
Like feeling like somebody is looking after you, like the angel is
Yes.
looking after you. Somebody loves you. Somebody cares enough for you. So you also mentions having low esteem, which I can understand why, and feeling like a damaged good. I know it's a long process for you to build back the self-esteem, right, and to love yourself. But how did you start, or how did you start that process? And what would you suggest for a person having low esteem, especially because of similar experience?
Yeah, of course. I think several things for me worked out. I had aunts who were nurse. One aunt in particular who was a nurse who was worried about my mental health, and so she suggested books by Les Brown, Jim Rohn. So I was fortunate to, at an early age in my late teens, to have been introduced to such as those writers. So also Carolyn Meese and Louise Hay. And so at an early age, reading some of those books, it helped me form this idea that maybe I do deserve to live, that life does hold something bigger for me than just a life filled with pain. And through that journey, I've also learned that we can choose how we live through our journey. And pain is a choice, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain. And yes, it takes time. It also takes a lot of practice. At least for me, it took practice. It wasn't an easy mind shift, but it is something that does take time. At least for me, it has been. And so with teachers in my life, whether they've been whether they knew that they were teachers, such as the Jim Rohn and the Louise Hay and Carolyn Meese, or people in my life, angels who were human beings who came in and coached me for one day or even 15 minutes by sitting with me at the airport, and we were just sharing life stories. But it's recognizing those opportunities when the universe sends people to hear a message, and I think we just need to be open to listening. And I think that has been a saving grace for me.
How did you like move on from the painful experience? Like all you gone through so many things, right? And I'm sure, like when you're telling the stories again, it does bring some, I'm not sure, maybe some kind of sadness, or how did you like move on from this kind of nightmare, I would say?
Well, I don't know if we necessarily, as a childhood sexual abuse survivor, I don't know if we really move on from it,
Mm-hmm.
but I should say, have practiced through meditation and yoga and journaling that it's a process. For sure, the shock factor is less and less, and I think it's because of the way that I view it, where I believe now, this wasn't years ago by any means, but I believe that now I'm in a position to share my story to help other survivors know that they're not alone, And I think that's the biggest thing, is to help other survivors know that they're not alone and that they're not a damaged good, and that, life is precious and we should seize it every day and make a difference in society. So I think that's what kind of gets me going.
Yeah, I think I really admire you for being vulnerable and then being open to share your stories and having that missions to help others who gone through the same experience, right? And saying, hey, I managed to go through this.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying my life now. You can too, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So describe to us, like, for example, when you're trying to rebuild your life or bounce back from this, right? What kind of support from people around you, whether it's family or friends, you want to have? So my question is here, maybe somebody know somebody who gone through the similar experience. Maybe they can apply the same thing.
I think the key piece of information is to listen. There are a lot of survivors who are adults who are afraid to share their story, and whether it be a friend, a partner, lover, aunt, uncle, whatever the relationship may be, I think we need to be open to listening to a very uncomfortable subject, because quite frankly, it is an uncomfortable subject and it has so much taboo. With children, I think same thing. We need to be open and listening to a child and asking, what do you mean? And be patient with that child. Especially if the child is very young, ask them, use a teddy bear or a doll. What do you mean? Can you show, mommy or daddy, how did this person touch you? The other thing I think is really important, especially, well, I think it applies to both adults and children, but especially teaching children what are the boundaries, especially personal boundaries. So when an adult touches a child, if it's uncomfortable for the child, they should be able to communicate that and feel safe and comfortable in doing so. And I think that comes with coaching from parents and showing them and allowing them to express themselves and helping them identify what's comfortable and not comfortable. And the same thing goes with adults, whether man or woman, having healthy boundaries of what that looks like. So when affection and love is shared, it's true. It's not uninvited affection and not being able to express that it's been uninvited and then creating a darker story for that person. So I think communication is a big one for both adults and children.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think also for the children, I'm just thinking maybe the parents building the relationship with the children so that the children trust enough, feel safe to share with the parents also. I think that's something I think I should take note and also.
Yes, especially since you have two little girls.
Yes, yeah. That actually, I mean, that's my wife has been really worried about raising girls. One of that is basically also the risk of sexually abuse also.
Right.
The one more questions I want to ask regarding this is, let's say you are talking to a girl or woman who experienced this sexually abuse, and you have, let's say, 3 to 5 minutes or 2 to 3, 5 minutes. What would you say to them?
Wow, Fauci, that's a big one. Because I would need
Basically,
whole week.
I know. Basically, I'm trying to ask, is there anything I haven't asked? Something important.
I guess if I were to go back and talk to not just any child, but to the child of when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably say, remember, you are very precious. Your life is precious. There is no money. Nothing is worth more than you living your life fully and being happy and experiencing the joys of all that life has to give. And that includes love, laughter, friendship, and just being open, the freedom to being open to what happens and facing fear as it comes and facing joy when it comes. And at some point, believing that you are beautiful and precious, and you have every right to be here. Not just anyone else, but I have a right to be here.
All right. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Delane. All right. Let me move to the second part. So basically, tell us about your current passions. What project you're working on now?
Okay. So as you had mentioned early in the podcast, I'm a jewelry designer and goldsmith, and that's what I've been doing. And I'm so passionate about it. But now I have this opportunity to do a collaborative art project called My Story, the Story of Many, with a French photographer. Her name is Delane Cooper. And what it is it's an art project to help survivors know that they are not alone, and for others that are out there to know that that this is an uncomfortable subject and that we as a society need to talk about it. So the art project involves me interviewing at least 10 survivors, men and women, because childhood sexual abuse knows no cultural boundaries. So there will be various cultures represented. And what I do that's different when I make jewelry is I listen to everybody's story, and then I interpret that into a piece of jewelry. So what I'm going to be doing is listening to these various survivors and designing and making 10 different pieces of jewelry that reflects that survivor's story. Then Kathy will be here, and she will take 2 photographs of the survivor wearing the piece of jewelry. One photograph will be of the survivor wearing a figurative speaking cloak of shame. And then the second photograph will be of the survivor wearing the piece of jewelry and really feeling empowered and showing their best self. And so it really is an art project to show how other survivors have gone and used their trauma as a springboard for growth and be a model for other survivors. And what's great about this art project is, unlike a lot of art that I've seen in the past, there have been visual bruises or some sort of abuse and disrespect to the human body. In this particular art project, there will be no abuse of any sort. People will be clothed and wearing the piece of jewelry and really shining through the photograph. So it's an art project of hope and really art to be instrumental in change.
Well, thank you so much, Delane, for investing your time, energy, and your effort in this project and in that project. I think that's going to be very interesting and exciting, as well as inspiring for those 10% you directly touch, as well as those who listens and see the pictures as well as see the jewelry. If you mentioned several books from Jim Rohn, etc. Do you have any recommendations for our listeners in terms of the books which has impacted your life or have touched your life?
Yes. One is called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. It's poetry, beautifully done. My mother, adopted mother, I should say, lent me her copy, and ever since then I went out and bought my own copy, and it's a beautiful book. Mm-hmm. The other is called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Neese. That seemed to have helped me get through my endometriosis and my fibromyalgia. And as a matter of fact, that book was written as a prescription by my doctor when he was treating me for fibromyalgia. So I thought that was interesting. And a book that I've had that was given to me when I was, I believe, 19 years old, 19 or 20, is a book by Richard Bach called Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. It's a short read. I've probably read that book over 20 times. You can read it in one sitting, but it's also the kind of book, if you flip to a page, there's a message in it.
Mm. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. How people can connect with you?
People can connect with me on Instagram, Delane Cooper, through email, thestudio@delane.ca, or my website, delane.ca, and Facebook.
Yeah, great. Final questions. What's your definitions of courage? I know you have a lot of courage.
My definition of courage, Fauci, is showing up every day and be authentic. That's courageous.
Well, really thank you, Delane, for sharing your story, for inspiring us, as well as especially those who gone through the similar experience with you. I think you're sharing that story, that you gone through that and become and shine through, climb Mount Kilimanjaro, become jewelry designer with fantastic design, as well as using that to help others also with your projects with Kathy Cooper.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did.
I did. Thank you so much for having me, Fauci. Blessings.
Thank you. Hey, if you like what we are creating with this podcast, make sure you join our Rebound Stronger Facebook group. This is the group where you can interact with like-minded people who wants to take their life to the next level, people who wants to turn their low points into breakthroughs. And as a bonus, the past podcast guests have also joined the group. So check it out and go to rebounstronger.com/group. Or you can also search the group in the Facebook. Just use the keyword Rebound Strongers. And we have big plans for you and the members. So see you inside.